This is the Beyond Barriers Unscripted Podcast, episode 24.
I think nothing about us without us really comes into play. That audio description was created by blind people, for blind people, and blind people need to be creating this work.
In this episode, I am joined by guest host Brandie Kubel and voice talent Roy Samuelson. Now, Brandie's been on the show before. She did host episode 15. Thank you, Brandie, for doing that. That was the little mini episode that we did as a presentation to the board of directors over at Society for the Blind. Brandie also teaches living skills at Society for the Blind as well as assistive technology. And she joins us today to help fill in some of the questions that perhaps I haven't thought of. Also joining us today is voice talent Roy Samuelson. Now, Roy has voiced literally thousands of movie and television titles, as well as commercials. He's done audio description for Star Trek Picard, First Man, the Chernobyl miniseries that was on HBO a couple years ago. It's actually available now. I recently watched it. And, you know, during that process, I kind of felt like I knew more about what was going on as a moviegoer. So I really am excited to share tonight's episode with you. And big thank you both to Roy and Brandie. Before we get started, I'd like to ask that if you enjoy the show, to please hit the like button as well as subscribe. That way, when we upload new content, you will be among the first to know. Moving forward, we're going to be releasing one episode monthly, and my plans are to release that on the third Tuesday of each month. So if you have any questions or comments or ideas for the show, maybe you just want to say hello. My name is Randy Owen, and the email address here is bb.unscripted@gmail.com. And now my conversation with Brandie and Roy. So I'd like to begin with a question to you, Brandie. What does audio description mean to you?
Ooh, very good question. Quality audio description or narration to me means equality and access, equal access to entertainment options that used to not exist, used to not be there. Once upon a time, my husband and I would go out to the movies and we would pay for our ticket and sit there, and we'd enjoy the popcorn and the snacks and everything, but we would lean towards each other and go, "What do you think just happened?" "I have no idea." "I know they walked in." "Okay." We would piece it together by what we were hearing. And we would watch the movie again when it released on video or on DVD and still piece it together. And so what audio narration brings is equal access. So we feel that we're in the middle of the movie too, and we're enjoying it just like everybody else is in the theater. And then we can participate in the conversation that's going to come after the movie.
Thank you, Brandie. It sounds like quality audio description can be a really powerful way to include everybody in the audience. However, it sounds like there's many, many things to consider with, creating described content. Roy, can you describe what a day at work is like for you, and maybe what goes on into producing quality audio description today?
That's a really great question. It changes all the time, but there are some very common themes that come up. Hearing Brandie describe what equal access means, I find that my contribution is one very small part of the audio description creation. I think when it comes to access, there's a bunch of things that are happening in audio description that I believe our audio description audiences are becoming much more sophisticated at identifying, specifically with the writing, that it is when it comes to access, I imagine no weak link in the audio description. So any one of these things, if there's even the slightest difference compared to what the sighted person is experiencing, that's going to be limiting that access. So from the writing, to make sure that the words that are chosen don't distract the audience from what's happening emotionally within the emotional nuance, the choice of the voice talent, of who is voicing it, the direction, who is directing that person, the mix, how much are you having to fiddle with the volume up and down during this experience? And that can be distracting. What about the timing? And timing is editing. So for example, if the monster opens the door and that line is read before the monster actually opens the door, then our audiences are going to react either too soon if it's pre-described, or afterward when everyone else is reacting and it's like, oh no, I'm bracing myself for something to happen. That those are just a handful of things. And then there's the quality control to make sure that all the character names are consistent and correct, to make sure that it's actually able to be in that movie theater or that home experience at the same time as sighted audiences, that all of these things happen. And my contribution as a voice talent is kind of in the earlier middle part of the whole audio description process, where I get a script that's, most of the work I do is remote. So, there's a lot of security measures in place in how I get the script. It's usually at the last minute. And whether I'm directed in some cases with an engineer and a director, or I'm doing some of the work based on experiencing the content of the audio and the video at the same time, it's making sure that my performance of those words that are in the script, the audio description script, are not going to distract you. So that, Randy, when you're hearing that mini-series, you're not going to think, there's something that it's taken me out. That's a really good tell that the voice talent or the writing or the mix or the edit or any number of these things is getting in the way. So I work pretty hard at making sure that the work I do when I'm recording is done right. And beyond that, I am constantly engaging with our audience and making sure that they're getting what they deserve. In the same way that Brandie talked about equal access, I think there's a lot of opportunities for equal access, and I'm kind of excited to talk about some of those in this conversation.
So, Roy, can you tell us a little bit how you got started in audio narration?
Sure. Audio description was relatively late in my voiceover career. I had built my own approach with learning about how to perform voiceover, whether it was commercials or video games or promo or audiobooks. And each one of those elements of audio description has a form of performance to it, a form of acting. Even a commercial where there's a product that's being advertised, there's a story that's being told, and there's a person that I'm talking to. There's a way that I bring those words to who I'm talking to, and I call that intention. A lot of people call it intention. It's not my word, but the idea of intention. What am I doing to someone? So while I might sound sad, or I might sound afraid, or I might sound excited, those can be converted into what I'm doing to the person I'm talking to excite, to inspire, to thrill, to surprise. Those active verbs are parts of the performance. And so what happened was I had an opportunity to audition for audio description, and it was just a very short script, maybe about a 2 or 3 minute scene. And I found that almost every aspect of each of those genres of voiceover that I had done, whether it was promo or audiobooks or video game characters or animation, that each of these things, there was just that edge of an element that could be incorporated into the audio description script. And it felt like a high wire act. It wasn't less of a performance, but I knew that I couldn't go over the top. It's like, the monster enters the room. Then, that's going to distract you if you hear that. But I can't also say, the monster enters the room. That it's the same words and I'm saying them, but there's different feelings that happen when you hear it in those two different ways. And so there's this sweet spot, and that sweet spot is the high wire act that, I got to tell you, after that audition, I barely slept that night, not because I was so excited to get the job, if I were to get the job, but also because I was introduced to something that encapsulated so many things about performance that I loved. And so my approach to audio description was really through this buildup of a lot of other elements of voice work.
So you were already doing acting.
Yeah. And the acting is a part of voice acting too. It's voice acting is basically, I don't have blocking and I don't have costumes, but there's still an element of that.
And you can definitely hear it in the narration. I've got a lot of friends who are blind and done radio. Mm-hmm. And since radio, a lot has changed in radio, there's opportunity, would you say, in audio description?
Absolutely. One of the things that is a surprisingly useful thing that's happened in the last year and a half because of the pandemic is remote recording. That a lot of these companies that were using their own in-house studios had to pivot. In California, on the first day that we were asked not to go into any building because of flattening the curve at the time they called it. It was I had 3 or 4 jobs that I just turned down. And I called each of the companies and I said, we can do this remotely. And they figured it out. They found a way to do it. So to answer your question, the opportunities now for blind professionals who have trained themselves in performance, whether that's having their own quality microphone, whether it's experience in radio and making sure that their performance is in that quality that fits right there in that sweet spot of audio description, there is no reason that blind professional talents can't do this work. And not just voicing, but we're also talking the engineering, the mix, the placement. And of course, I worked on a project that was created by a blind writer of audio description. So, and it turned out incredibly great. I shouldn't even have to say that, but there's been, there's a little bit of surprise there. How can a blind person write audio description? Well, it was done. And it's modeled. It's a wonderful script, and we're looking forward to sharing that. But these are the opportunities that I think nothing about us without us really comes into play. That audio description was created by blind people for blind people, and blind people need to be creating this work because those are the experts. When Randy mentioned what quality means, I love how you said that, equal access. I think that the word parity comes to mind. Parity in the sense that a sighted person gets a similar experience that the audio description audience gets. But there's another element that contributes to that quality and excellence. And I believe it does have to do with blind professionals, because blind professionals are not only creators of audio description, but also understand the other side as an audience member, a consumer, if that's the appropriate word. I like to say audience member because it is they're experiencing a performance, and who better to go to that understands that nuance and understands the importance of what words mean and how they come across than blind professionals.
Absolutely. Your most recent Meet Your Narrator episode featured a blind narrator.
Satana Howery voiced I think it's 9 seasons of Seinfeld. And what's fascinating about that is that her interview, it's relatively short, but the second half of it, she really addresses a lot of important points. I'd encourage you to if you haven't heard it, make sure you stick with this podcast. But there's also, if you have a little extra time, the thing that's fascinating about that perspective is that the company that the platform Netflix valued that this title, that there's no more new episodes of Seinfeld. This is an archived series that's a lot of people understand and connect with and know. But what I find fascinating is that Satana, a human, voiced it. That Netflix recognized the importance of a comedy to be voiced by a human, and not only just a human, but also a blind performer, and to be able to have that as yet another example of what quality and excellence means, I think is absolutely significant.
Now, Brandie mentioned that you host a podcast, Roy, and I believe it's called Know Your Narrator. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So the the Audio Description Network Alliance, the ADNA, is kind of like an audio description internet movie database. It's a collection of audiences contributing credits of titles and voice talents or engineers or writers or quality control, anyone who's involved in the creation of audio description. It gives a reference to, oh, I like this show. What else have they worked on? Part of that Audio Description Network Alliance, I was finding that a lot of audiences weren't really familiar with the different kinds of things that go into the work of audio description. And we started off explicitly focusing on the voice talents because that seemed like the easiest way to get people on board. That's the most accessible in the sense of recognizable. So like if we were to have started talking about engineering, it might have been a little harder leap to get to, that most people can identify a voice and understand what a voice person does. So we focused on interviewing voice talents in the Know Your Narrator series. And so part of that podcast was showing how different voice talents approach audio description. And what's really cool is that while there's a lot of similarities, there's also a lot of nuance there. And it was really fun to almost, as my friend Melody said, create audio description snobs in the best way possible to kind of, tweak that palette. I've got my own favorite voice talents. And when I hear them, there's one particular voice. And when she speaks, it's just like, it gets me in that space that's so great. But beyond that, we started doing Know Your Narrator bonus episodes because we weren't only interviewing narrators, but those other roles. And being able to distinguish those different roles helps, I think, educate myself and learn how other people are approaching it, and also educates our audience and hopefully the people that are creating audio description.
Can you tell us a little bit about Kevin's process?
I'd love to. About a year and a half ago at the ACB convention, I was honored to be asked to do a keynote speech, and I had already created the content. I just needed a platform for it. At the time, it's called Kevin's Process. Now we call it Kevin's Way. And the idea is to break down those different elements of audio description. And the idea is to identify what quality and excellence means in the context of audio description. And what we do is give it a signal, a way that audiences can recognize that they're in good hands. I'm thinking, Brandie, about your experience going to the movie theater and not having audio description. There's also another experience where a headset might be given to an audio description audience member going into the theater. And there's probably about 20 to 30 minutes between the time that the headphones are actually in someone's hands and the time the film actually starts, where there's a lot of tension. Is it going to work? Or is it one of those amplified headsets? Or is the battery out? Or is it going to be crispy? Or is it going to play the wrong movie? That until it actually starts, there's this, what's going to happen? One of the things that I found fascinating in audio description is that identification of audio description is a logo that looks like the letter A, the letter D, followed by 3 parentheses that symbolize a waveform coming out like a speaker, like the letter D is echoing out. So the letters A, D plus a few parentheses. And I think it's fascinating that here's this accessibility logo that's for blind people, and it's a visual logo. And it seems like a lot of people didn't really understand that conflict or that irony. I'm not sure what the appropriate word is. So Kevin's Way establishes audio tone that lets audiences know you're in good hands. An Energy Star logo might be a similar comparison. A Good Housekeeping seal of approval, the THX, that these are identifiable brands that have meaning, and it's assigned meaning based on experience. And how great to know that, if you're going to see a movie, who knows if it was created by somebody in there, who's never done it before, who might be a little inexperienced, to be able to assure our audiences that this is a quality experience. And the other thing that I loved about Kevin's Way is that it does include blind professionals in the process, that we make sure that employment getting paid for this work is for front and center because, again, nothing about us without us. I'm a sighted person, and I've really stepped into audio description as an advocate, but I've also learned a lot that this is definitely an opportunity to make sure that blind professionals are able to create this and drive this in the way that they want it to go. I'm just the support mechanism. I want to be the assistant, well, I guess in this case, a virtual assistant, but it's basically what do our audiences want and how can we support that?
It's become very clear. I can hear it in your voice, Roy. You're very passionate about quality audio description. Where does this come from?
I've had a few experiences in my life, particularly growing up. Brandie, I hate to keep coming back to a part of your conversation earlier in this podcast, but when you were talking about seeing a movie with audio description and then being able to talk about it afterward, that being able to talk about it afterward, let's call that connection, that you're able to connect in a way that makes it's fewer roadblocks. There's fewer speed bumps on the freeway of conversation.
Yeah.
That connection, right?
Yeah.
It's something, it's not that, oh, well, here's what happened. No, you already know. You already know what happened.
You're in the loop.
Exactly, yeah. So that loop that we're talking about, I found growing up, I was in a lot of cases not connected because the way that I felt about certain things was a lot different than the world that I was living in. And it was just the time, the location, and who I was and the culture it was that at the time, being gay was hard. It was not accepted. It was weird. It was different, and it was not talked about. And so there was always a part of me that I could not feel like I could connect with other people or even share it for fear of shame or other things. How does this relate to audio description? I'm gonna bring it around. One of my dearest friends, when I moved to California, I moved to California, I met someone who became a dear friend of mine. And this was the first time in my life that I could connect with someone and that I was able to open up. And as a friend to a friend, I saw him like a big brother. And we cared for each other for decades, and we looked after each other, and we had fun together. We went like snorkeling and traveling, and we'd talk about people that we were dating or, hanging out with friends. He ended up with a form of cancer that made him lose his eyesight. And it was around the time of the second season of a TV show that we love to laugh about and talk about together. And he's in the middle of nurses coming in, prodding him with all sorts of needles and tests and trying to go day to day through all the challenges that you can imagine in a hospital. And he and I are laughing our asses off. We're just laughing our butts off, talking about this second episode or the second season of this TV show that we thought was the funniest thing ever. And we weren't talking about all the procedures that we had to go through. We didn't have to stop and talk about, that there was this, what happened was in the back of the scene, there was like a bunch of trumpet players that were giggling. He already knew. And that was the realistic connection that he and I could continue regardless of him being blind or sighted. And that struck me so hard. That experience has really grown my passion because I understand what it's like to not be connected. And I also understand when that connection's real. Kevin is a dear friend of mine who has passed away, and it's in honor of him that Kevin's Way is named. But he was also a person that I became very close to, and we had this pen pal phone call, text messaging sort of connection where he knew everything about TV shows, and he would tell me what was going on, and it was all because of audio description. And he shared his experience and all sorts of things. So it's really making sure that this connection and this parity that every sighted person just takes advantage of, that sort of thing is as easy for our blind and low vision audiences as it is for sighted people.
Wow. I mean, I have tears in my eyes because it does transcend. It does connect you. It was television that that connected my sister and I the year that I lost my sight. Her describing things and, you know. Okay, so what was the television show that you guys laughed so hard about?
Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Great show.
But it's like, here's the thing. It's like anybody else that were just to jump in on this conversation right now. It's like, why are you so touched by Marvelous Mrs. Maisel? It's just a TV show. And it's like, yeah, it is just a TV show, but it's a vehicle for connection in the same way that you and your sister could connect. It's like that word connection is the crux of this. Yeah, it is just entertainment. It's not changing lives, but there's something really important about using television, using entertainment specifically to be able to have that connection.
Have you ever done like live announcing or, describing live events?
Sure. Live audio description is great. Audio description announcer. I think there's all sorts of terms for it. I like that there's been consistency with audio description for most of this work. But I know a bunch of people that do audio description live for theater, and it's a completely different experience. In those roles, those people are both the writer and the voice talent, and it's also live. So there's that announcer experience to it. I had an experience to do a few live sporting events with audio description, and it was really exciting. And I saw the opportunities, and the people that do it, I am so impressed with their skills.
Have you ever voiced an audiobook? And question for both of you, what's your favorite audiobook?
Brandie, can I jump in? And this is so biased. I wish I had another book to share, but I'm going to name one that I voiced. So it's called Fallout by Steve Shanken, Sheinken. And he brings history alive. It's listed as a young adult, not like a young adult history book. It's all nonfiction. It's all true. But it starts off with this little boy collecting his tip back in the 1930s from these two old ladies in a apartment. And then he gets the tip. It's like 50 cents. He trips, falls, and one of the nickels pops open, and there's like a little mic. There's like a film inside. And that's how it starts. It's like history becomes alive with this. It's all about the Cold War with Russia. And it's fascinating. And he brings it to such a level. Like, I am not going to shame my teachers of history, but I never could get past dates and people. There was no connection. This guy writes in a way that connects history and gets me excited. It felt like a spy novel. It was so exciting.
I got to plug my friend, my college friend. So this is a shout out to Andy Weir, author of The Martian and Artemis, and now Project Hail Mary, which was one of Obama's picks for the summer read, and was on the New York Times list for, I don't know, some 10 weeks or something like that. Anyway, an astronaut wakes up and he doesn't know he's in space or why he's there. And he just knows that there's two corpses there and he's not quite sure how he got there. And there's a little bit of a little blind twist in there. So,
Brandie, do you have a question for Roy that you've been wanting to ask?
So, have you ever met a celebrity from one of the movies or television shows that you voiced who complimented you on the job you did?
That's a really good question. I'm going to probably sidestep that just a little bit and answer it a different way, because a lot of the industry doesn't know about audio description. Thankfully, that's changing. That's changing pretty fast, particularly with all the streaming services, that people are starting to understand audio description in a way that's never been done before. What I find fascinating is that each of these, I'm a member of the Television Academy. That's the group that votes for the Primetime Emmys. And one of the things that happened this year is that the Television Academy, through the Performers Peer Group, There's like 30 different peer groups in this TV Academy. So there's producers, there's executives, there's sound people, there's performers like me. And each of them have their own executive committee that helps guide the Television Academy towards what each of those peer groups wants. And one of the challenges with our peer group is that opportunities for disabled people weren't as common as people that weren't disabled. In other words, to join the Television Academy, you had to have so many credits, but to get credits, you have to have opportunities, and opportunities were not happening for disabled performers as much. And what I've found fascinating is the Television Academy there's a great panel that anybody can go to if you go to Emmys.com. I think it's the power of storytelling, disability representation, some combination of those words. But it's basically talking about disabled performers and their experiences and the casting choices that were made. And with all that, what's really exciting this year is that audio description voice talents like myself, like Satana, like anyone who voices TV shows can now use those television credits to qualify to join the Television Academy so that they can vote on the Primetime Emmys. The implications of this are pretty deep. The biggest one is that there's now a place at the table for this reputable organization for disabled talents to have more opportunity and to more representation, frankly. The other thing that's really cool is that audio description is now a part of their membership. There was a panel that was that I put together, I produced, that included 2 blind talents and 2 sighted people that each had given a story of how audio description is created so that those creators of content can understand the importance of representing the nearly 32 million blind and low vision Americans. You can see where the implications of this keeps growing. On the Oscars side, the Oscars had live AD. You were asking about audio description announcing live, that this year they had it. But what's really fascinating about the Oscars this year is that not only did they do the pre-show, the actual show, and the post-show, but they were using on social media a hashtag so that blind people could give instant feedback to the announcers to say, we want more facial expressions, or we want more costume descriptions, or what's the background look like? And that they could adapt instantly. And what I find fascinating about this, again, back to connection, is that our connection between the audience and the experience of the show was closed in the best way possible, that there was now this connection that hadn't been there before. Not only having audio description, but also allowing our audiences to guide what they wanted in the audio description. And that got me so excited. So these are the sorts of things that are happening just this year.
So, Roy, can you give us an example of any titles that have been created with audio description in mind from the very beginning?
Absolutely. There's some really great examples. The first thing that comes to mind is Apple TV Plus's Series C, SEE. And Joe Strechay, he's a co-producer on season 2, and he made it very clear that audio description is included in that process. I know that The Mandalorian had the audio description writer on set so that she could understand what was happening when she wrote the description. I know that myself, I've been involved in a handful of projects that had feature films specifically that had audio description considered as it was being created. And Neil Gaiman, for his series on Amazon with the Angels, I'm so sorry. It's so embarrassing that name is slipping my head right now. Everyone's shouting at me right now and I can't hear it. It's Good Omens. It's called Good Omens. And before Good Omens came out, someone asked Neil Gaiman on social media, is your show going to have audio description? And he said, yes, I've been collaborating with a scriptwriter, or something to that effect. It wasn't that, don't quote me, but that was the gist of it, is that he was aware that it would have audio description and that it was being included in the process. So all these examples, Randy, are showing that this isn't an afterthought. It doesn't have to be an afterthought, and it actually makes it better when it's not.
I want to stop for a minute and just make sure that I don't forget. What's the best way to contact you? There's
a few different ways. I'm on Twitter at Roy Samuelson. There's also the ADNA, but reverse it. So it's ADNA the at ADNA the. And I'd love to plug the Facebook group Audio Description Discussion. It's moderated by myself. Kevin and I created it, and now there's Serena, Dane, and myself that are moderating it. We've got 1,700 people, but you can be a lurker without even having to join and see what amazing, lively conversations are happening with both audiences and creators. And there's been a tremendous influence on audio description because of the conversations that are having in that group. And of course, I love to plug the Audio Description Project, the Audio Description Project on ACB. I think that's adp.acb.org. If there's too many letters, just Google Audio Description Project. It's one of the go-to places to learn about which shows have audio description, how to turn it on, and some current events. That panel for the Emmys was listed there, as well as Satana's interview. So there's a lot of great content that's available there. I think that covers it.
What would you recommend, or where would you recommend someone start that wants to get involved, with creating descriptive content, whether it be a voice artist or engineering, writing, producing, directing?
That's a great question. I think there's a bunch of different ways, and I find that when I'm coaching someone, that there's a lot of things in their already lived experience that can contribute to audio description. And I find, you've mentioned a few times my passion. One of the things that excites me about audio description is that there's this background of voiceover that I had that I was able to bring to audio description. Maybe somebody else has gardening. Maybe somebody else loves cooking. There could be someone who believes in yoga and knows how to describe all the moves. It's been, there was one author who had a children's book who decided to do audio description for her images. And, unrelated, there's also Imagination Video Books that's doing that exact same thing for either blind parents or blind children to be able to connect themselves. So thinking about what your existing experience is and how that could feed into audio description, I think is a really great way to start, regardless of the role. And as far as learning how to be an engineer, there's some really talented engineers who are blind that have provided different ways of accessing the different programs, the Digital Audio Workstation, DAWs, DAWs. There's also, as opposed to JAWS for Windows, right? And then there's for voice talents, I do coaching for both blind and sighted people for just a workout. Imagine going to the gym and trying out some different exercises that it's specifically on the narration side. There's a handful of different companies and organizations and groups that are teaching audio description. If you go to that audio description project, there's a handful of contacts there. AD Training Retreats is there with Colleen and Jan. Joel Snyder teaches Audio Description Institute, I believe it's called, Dr. Joel Snyder. And I think there's a handful of others that are also exploring different ways of instructing in audio description. So that's just a handful. And that's not it. There's so many different ways to learn. I find that voice talents particularly have a lot of different assumptions about what audio description is or even what voiceover is. There's a great website called iwanttobeavoiceactor.com, and it's mostly text-based. It's accessible. It's accessible, and it's got, I go to it all the time, and I've been working in this business for quite a while, but I still find content that's really helpful, whether it's maybe a tweak that I can do to my home studio, something I can do differently with my mic, or even learning about how to record or treat a room so it doesn't have this echo. There's all sorts of ways to learn, but I find that as long as blind people who want to get into this business and treat it with the respect and professionalism that they know it deserves, that the sky's the limit.